The rain came soft that morning, the kind that didn't announce itself but soaked through everything slowly, deliberately. Matthias Crane stood at the front desk of the Saltwind Inn, his duffel bag at his feet, his hands resting on the worn-wood counter like he was steadying himself against something invisible. He wasn't checking in. He was leaving. And for the first time in 8 years of coming to this place, he didn't want to go. Behind the desk, Benita Brown kept her eyes on the guest ledger, her pen hovering over his name. She hadn't written the checkout time yet. Her hand was still. "Mr. Crane," she said quietly, and her voice had that particular softness people use when they're trying not to let something break. "Your receipt." He didn't take it. The lobby smelled like old wood and salt air. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the ocean moved in that low, constant rhythm that made time feel slower here. Made everything feel like it could wait. But it couldn't. Matthias looked at her then, really looked, and Benita felt it like a hand pressed gently to her chest. His eyes were gray, tired, kind. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and learned to expect nothing. "Benita," he said, and the way he said her name made her throat tighten. She finally met his gaze. "I don't know how to say this," he continued, his voice low, steady, like he was confessing something he'd been holding for too long. "But I think I've been coming back here all these years for the wrong reason." Her breath caught. "And I think," he said, quieter now, "I finally know what the right one is." The rain tapped against the window. The lobby was empty. Just the two of them, and the weight of something unspoken filling the space between them. Benita's fingers tightened around the pen. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. 3 weeks earlier, Matthias Crane had arrived at the Saltwind in the way he always did, alone, with one duffel bag, no expectations, and a reservation for 7 nights. He'd been coming here every October for the past 8 years. Same room. Same routine. Same silence. The inn sat on the edge of a small coastal town that tourists forgot about after summer ended. By October, the place was mostly empty, just a few stragglers, retirees, people passing through. That's how Matthias liked it. Quiet. Forgettable. He wasn't running from anything. He just had nothing left to run toward. Matthias had spent 37 years in the army. He'd seen 3 wars, led men through impossible situations, earned medals he kept in a drawer and never looked at. He'd learned discipline, duty, how to survive on nothing, how to make decisions that cost lives and carry them without flinching. But no one taught him what to do when it was over. His wife, Caroline, had died 8 years ago. Breast cancer. She'd fought it quietly, the way she did everything. And when she finally let go, Matthias realized he'd spent so much of their marriage deployed, distant, half present even when he was home. He'd loved her. But he hadn't known how to show it until it was too late. After she passed, he'd sold their house, moved into a small apartment 2 states away, and started taking these trips. Same town. Same inn. Same week every year. He told himself it was because he liked the ocean. But really it was because here, no one knew him. No one expected anything. He could sit by the water and let the hours pass and not have to explain why he was alone. Benita Brown had worked at the Saltwind Inn for 3 years. She was 24, though most people guessed younger. She had warm brown skin, careful eyes, and hands that were always busy, wiping down counters, folding linens, refilling coffee in the lobby even when no one asked. She worked the front desk in the mornings, housekeeping in the afternoons, and sometimes the evening shift if someone called in sick. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Benita had grown up in a neighborhood where dreaming felt dangerous. Her father had left when she was 9. Her mother worked 2 jobs until her hands went numb from carpal tunnel and her back gave out from years of cleaning other people's houses. Now her mother lived with chronic pain and couldn't work at all. Benita had 2 younger siblings still in school, Malik, 16, and Ayana, 13. She sent money home every week, paid for groceries, kept the lights on, made sure Malik had bus fare and Ayana had school supplies. She dropped out of community college halfway through her 2nd year. Not because she didn't want to learn, but because her family needed her more than she needed a degree she couldn't afford to finish. The Saltwind Inn didn't pay much, but it was steady. And the owner, Mrs. Calloway, let her take home day-old pastries from the breakfast bar and didn't ask too many questions when Benita stayed late to use the office computer to apply for better jobs she never got called back for. Benita had learned not to hope too loudly. She kept her head down, did her work, smiled at guests because that's what you do. And at night, she went home to a small apartment she shared with 2 other girls, ate cereal for dinner, and fell asleep to the sound of traffic outside her window. She didn't expect her life to change. She'd stopped expecting that a long time ago. Matthias noticed her the first day. Not in the way men sometimes noticed her, the kind of looking that made her feel small, like she was something to take instead of someone to see. No. Matthias noticed her the way someone notices light coming through a window. Quietly. Without intent. Just aware. She'd checked him in with that same soft professionalism she gave everyone. Her voice was warm but not overly friendly. Her smile was real, but guarded. "Room 12, Mr. Crane," she'd said, sliding the key across the counter. "Same as always." He'd paused. "You remember. You've been coming here a long time," she said simply. That was all. But it stayed with him. Most people didn't remember. Most people didn't care to. Benita noticed him too. She noticed all the regulars. It was part of the job. But Matthias was different. He was older, 60 she guessed, though he carried himself like someone who hadn't softened with age. His hair was gray, cut short and neat. His posture was straight, military. His hands were scarred in small ways, the kind that came from work, from living, not from carelessness. He didn't talk much. Didn't ask for anything. Every morning he'd come down for coffee, nod politely, and disappear for hours. Sometimes he'd sit on the bench outside, facing the ocean. Sometimes he'd walk the empty beach, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind. He looked lonely. Not sad, exactly. Just alone in a way that seemed permanent. Benita understood that. She was surrounded by people all day, guests, co-workers, her roommates. But she felt alone most of the time too. Alone in a way that didn't go away just because someone was nearby. So she noticed Matthias. And without meaning to, she started noticing when he came down for coffee. Started making sure the pot was fresh. Started leaving an extra blueberry muffin on the counter near his usual spot, wrapped in a napkin, like it was a coincidence. He never said anything about it. But he always took it. It started with the coffee. On the 4th morning of his stay, Matthias came down earlier than usual. The lobby was still dim, the sky outside barely light. Benita was behind the desk, sorting through invoices, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. "Morning, Mr. Crane," she said softly, as if speaking too loud might disturb the quiet. "Morning." He nodded toward the coffee station. "I'm early." "Pot's already fresh," she said. "I figured you'd be down soon." He paused, halfway across the lobby. Turned back to look at her. "You made it for me?" Benita felt a small flush of warmth rise to her cheeks. She shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "You're the only guest who drinks it this early. Didn't seem right to make you wait." Matthias studied her for a moment, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. Like he was trying to understand something he couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said quietly. And the way he said it, like those 2 words carried more weight than they should, made Benita's chest tighten just a little. That afternoon, Benita was cleaning room 12. She knocked first, the way she always did, even when she knew the guest was out. "Housekeeping," she called. No answer. She opened the door with her master key and stepped inside. The room was neat. Almost unnaturally so. The bed was already made, not perfectly, but well enough that she could tell he'd tried. His duffel bag sat in the corner, zipped closed. A book lay on the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses folded on top of it. Benita smiled a little. Most guests left their rooms like small disasters. Towels on the floor. Beds unmade. Coffee cups everywhere. But Matthias Crane was different. She moved through the room quietly, replacing towels, checking the bathroom, running the vacuum even though the carpet barely needed it. And then she saw it. On the small desk by the window, there was a notepad, and written in clean, careful handwriting. "Thank you for the muffins. You didn't have to, but I noticed. MC." Benita froze. Her heart did something strange, a small flip, a flutter she hadn't felt in a long time. He'd noticed. She set the fresh towels down slowly, her hands suddenly unsteady. She looked at the note again, as if reading it a second time might change what it said. But it didn't. He'd noticed. And he'd thanked her. Not with a tip left on the dresser. Not with a casual comment in passing. With this. A note. Written by hand. Left where only she would see it. Benita pressed her lips together, trying not to smile too wide. She didn't write back. That would have been too much. Too forward. But the next morning, she left 2 muffins. They started talking on the 5th day. It was late afternoon, and Benita was outside on the inn's small back porch, taking her 15-minute break. She sat on the old wooden bench, her shoes off, her feet aching from standing all day. The ocean stretched out in front of her, gray and restless under a cloudy sky. The wind was cool. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and closed her eyes, just breathing. Mind if I sit? She opened her eyes. Matthias stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his jacket, his expression soft, uncertain. Of course, Benita said, shifting over to make room. He sat down slowly, carefully, like his joints protested a little. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, side by side, watching the waves roll in and pull back, in and pull back. You come out here a lot, Matthias said finally. Only place I can think, Benita replied. It's quiet. He nodded. That's why I come here too. She glanced at him. To the inn. To this town, he said. Every year. Same week. Why? Matthias was quiet for a long moment. His jaw tightened slightly, like he was deciding how much to say. My wife died 8 years ago, he said finally, his voice low. I started coming here after. I told myself it was because I needed a break. But really, I think I just needed to be somewhere she'd never been. Somewhere I didn't have to remember. Benita's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. So she didn't say anything. She just nodded, letting him know she'd heard him. I'm sorry, she said after a moment. Me too. Matthias looked out at the water. I spent most of our marriage deployed. Gone. Even when I was home, I wasn't really there. And now she's gone, and I can't get that time back. Benita felt the weight of his words settle between them. I think she knew you loved her, Benita said softly. Matthias turned to look at her. How do you know? Because you're still carrying it, she said. People don't carry love this long if it wasn't real. His eyes softened. For a moment, he looked like he might say something. But he didn't. He just nodded. What about you? Matthias asked after a while. What about me? Why do you work so hard? Benita smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Because I have to. Family. She nodded. My mom. My younger brother and sister. Mom can't work anymore. So I do. That's a lot to carry, Matthias said quietly. It's just life, Benita said with a small shrug. Everybody's carrying something. Matthias looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something shift inside him. She was young. Too young to carry so much. But she did it anyway, without bitterness, without complaint. There was a strength in her that reminded him of soldiers he'd served with. The kind of strength that didn't come from muscle or rank, but from refusing to let the weight break you. You're kind, he said. Benita looked at him, surprised. What? You're kind, Matthias repeated. Not just polite. Kind. There's a difference. Benita felt her cheeks warm. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses forming on her palms from folding linens and scrubbing floors. Thank you, she said softly. And for a moment, they just sat there. 2 people who'd learned to expect nothing. 2 people who, for the first time in a long time, felt less alone. The shift happened so quietly that neither of them could say when it began. By the 6th day, Matthias found himself looking for Benita. Not obviously. Not in a way that anyone else would notice. But when he came down for coffee in the morning, his eyes went to the front desk first. When he returned from his walks, he felt a small lift in his chest if she was the one behind the counter. And Benita, she started listening for his footsteps. Started noticing the exact time he came down each morning. Started finding excuses to be in the lobby when he passed through. They talked more. Small conversations. Nothing heavy. About the weather. About the books he read. About the seagulls that gathered on the beach each afternoon like they were waiting for something. But underneath the small talk, something else was growing. Something neither of them knew how to name. On the 7th morning, his last full day, Matthias came down to find the lobby empty. No Benita. A different woman stood behind the desk, older, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Doris. "Morning," she said flatly, barely looking up from her phone. "Morning," Matthias replied. "Is Benita working today?" Doris shrugged. "She switched shifts. Won't be until tonight." Matthias felt something sink in his chest. He nodded, poured his coffee, and walked outside to the bench. But the coffee tasted wrong. The ocean looked grayer. The quiet he'd once come here for felt heavy now, oppressive. He realized, sitting there alone, that he'd been looking forward to seeing her. And that realization frightened him. Benita hadn't switched shifts. She'd asked to work the evening instead because she was afraid. Afraid of what she was starting to feel. She'd woken up that morning thinking about Matthias Crane. About the way he said her name. About the way he listened when she spoke, like her words mattered. About the note he'd left on the desk in his room. And it terrified her. Because men like him, good men, kind men, men who saw her as more than just the help, didn't stay. They checked out. They went back to their real lives. And she was left behind, cleaning the rooms they'd occupied, erasing the brief traces of their presence. She couldn't afford to care. Not when he was leaving tomorrow. Not when she was just a hotel employee, and he was a decorated army veteran who'd lived a life she couldn't even imagine. Not when the gap between them, age, experience, class, felt like an ocean she had no boat to cross. So she'd asked Doris to cover the morning shift. And she'd spent the day at home, staring at the ceiling, telling herself it was better this way. That evening, Matthias sat in his room. He'd packed his duffel bag. His checkout was scheduled for 8 a.m. He had a 6-hour drive ahead of him tomorrow. Back to his apartment. Back to his routine. Back to being alone. He stood by the window, looking out at the darkening sky, the ocean barely visible now in the fading light. He thought about Benita. About the way she'd smiled when he'd thanked her for the coffee. About the way her voice softened when she talked about her family. About the way she sat on that bench, her feet bare, her face turned toward the sea like she was trying to breathe in something she couldn't find anywhere else. He thought about how, for the first time in 8 years, he didn't want to leave. And then he thought about Caroline, his wife, the woman he'd loved and failed and lost. Guilt settled over him like a weight. What right did he have to feel this way? To think about another woman? To want something he'd already had and wasted? He was 60 years old. Too old to start over. Too old to hope for something new. And Benita, she was young. She had her whole life ahead of her. She deserved someone her own age. Someone who could give her the future she deserved, not a man whose best years were behind him. Matthias sat down on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped between his knees. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself he'd check out in the morning, drive away, and forget. But he knew, even as he thought it, that forgetting her would be impossible. Benita came in for the evening shift at 6. The lobby was quiet. Only 2 other guests were staying at the inn, and both were out. She busied herself restocking the coffee station, folding brochures, wiping down the desk for the 3rd time. Anything to keep her hands moving. Anything to stop thinking about the fact that Matthias was upstairs, and tomorrow he'd be gone. At 7:30, the lobby door opened. She looked up. Matthias stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his expression uncertain. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Benita's heart kicked against her ribs. He walked toward the desk slowly, like he was figuring out what to say as he moved. "I thought you had the morning shift," he said. "I switched." "Why?" Benita hesitated. She could lie. Make up something about needing the hours, about scheduling conflicts. But she didn't. "Because I didn't want to say goodbye," she said quietly. Matthias stopped. His eyes searched hers. "Benita." "I know," she interrupted, her voice trembling just slightly. "I know you're leaving tomorrow. I know this doesn't make sense. I know I'm just the girl who works here, and you're just a guest, and this is nothing. I know that." It's not nothing, Matthias said, his voice rough. Benita looked down, blinking hard. Then what is it? Matthias didn't answer right away. He stood there, on the other side of the desk, the space between them feeling impossibly wide. I don't know, he said finally. But I've been coming here for 8 years, and this is the first time I didn't want to leave. Benita's breath caught. You're leaving anyway, she said softly. I have to. Why? Because. Matthias exhaled, running a hand over his face. Because I'm 60 years old, Benita. Because you're 24. Because I'm a widower who doesn't know how to do this anymore. Because you deserve someone who can give you a real future, not someone who's already lived most of his life. That's not fair, Benita said, her voice stronger now. You don't get to decide what I deserve. I'm trying to protect you. From what? She stepped closer to the desk, her eyes fierce now. From being cared about? From feeling something real for the first time in years. Matthias stared at her, his jaw tight. You think I don't know what people would say? Benita continued. You think I don't know how this looks? A poor hotel worker and a man twice her age? I know. I've thought about it. But you know what I've thought about more? What? Matthias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That for the first time in my life, someone saw me. Not the uniform. Not the girl who cleans rooms and smiles for tips. Me. And I don't know what to do with that, Mr. Crane. I don't know what this is or what it means. But I know I don't want you to leave tomorrow pretending it didn't happen. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with everything unsaid. Matthias looked at her, this young woman with fire in her eyes and a softness in her heart, and he felt something break open inside him. Something he'd kept locked for 8 years. I don't want to hurt you, he said quietly. Then don't walk away, Benita whispered. Matthias didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. Then don't walk away. But how could he stay? What would that even look like? A long distance. What? Relationship? At his age? With someone who had a life, responsibilities, dreams he'd only get in the way of? He thought about his daughter, Emma. 32 years old, living in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids. He hadn't told her about Benita. How could he? What would he even say? I met someone. She's younger than you. She works at a hotel. I think I'm falling for her. It sounded ridiculous even in his head. And yet, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Benita had looked at him tonight. The way her voice had cracked when she said she didn't want him to pretend it didn't happen. Because it had happened. Whatever this was, it was real. And Matthias Crane, who'd spent a lifetime being disciplined, controlled, certain, had no idea what to do. Benita didn't sleep either. She lay in her small bed in her shared apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if she'd said too much. Wondering if she'd ruined the one good thing that had happened to her in years. Her roommate, Jasmine, had already asked her what was wrong. Benita had waved her off, said it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. And tomorrow, it would be gone. He came downstairs at 7:30, his duffel bag in hand, his face drawn and tired. He'd barely slept. His body felt heavy, like he was carrying more than just luggage. Benita was behind the desk. Of course she was. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Mr. Crane, she said softly, her voice carefully neutral. Professional. Like last night hadn't happened. Benita. He set his bag down. I need to talk to you. Your checkout is ready, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Everything's been processed. You're all set. Benita. I hope you have a safe drive, she continued, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. And we hope to see you again next year. Matthias's chest tightened. She was protecting herself, building the wall back up. And he didn't blame her. But he couldn't leave like this. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Please. Just 5 minutes. Benita's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She swallowed hard, then nodded. There's no one else here, she said. We can talk now. Matthias glanced around the empty lobby, then back at her. Not here. Outside. She hesitated, then looked at the clock. Her shift didn't end for another hour, but Mrs. Calloway wasn't in yet. Doris was in the back doing laundry. "Okay," Benita said quietly. 5 minutes. They walked to the bench. The same one they'd sat on before. The ocean was calm this morning, the sky pale and soft with early light. The air smelled like salt and something sweet, jasmine maybe, from the bushes near the porch. Benita sat down, her hands folded in her lap. Matthias sat beside her, but not too close. He left space between them. Respectful space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Matthias broke the silence. "I told you my wife died 8 years ago," he said, his voice low. "But I didn't tell you how." Benita looked at him, waiting. "She had breast cancer," Matthias continued. "Stage 4 by the time they found it. She fought for 2 years. And I was there, but not really. I was there physically, but emotionally, I'd spent so many years shutting down, staying controlled, keeping everything locked inside. That's what the military teaches you. How to compartmentalize. How to survive." He paused, his jaw working. "When she was dying, she told me she forgave me. For all the years I was gone. For all the times I chose duty over her. She said she understood." His voice cracked slightly. "But I never forgave myself." Benita's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for his hand, but she didn't. She just listened. "After she died, I shut down completely," Matthias said. "I moved away. I stopped talking to most people. I came here every year because it was the one place I could be alone without anyone asking me how I was doing or telling me it was time to move on." He turned to look at her. "And then you happened." Benita's breath caught. "You weren't supposed to matter," Matthias said softly. "You were just the woman at the front desk. Someone who made my coffee and smiled politely. That's all it was supposed to be." "But it wasn't," Benita whispered. "No," Matthias said. "It wasn't." He looked out at the ocean, his hands clasped tightly together. "I'm terrified, Benita," he admitted. "I'm terrified because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in again. I don't know how to be the kind of man you deserve. And I'm terrified that if I try, I'll fail you the way I failed Caroline." Benita was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Matthias nodded. "When I was 17, Benita began, her voice steady but soft, I had a boyfriend. His name was Marcus. He was older, 22. I thought he loved me. He said all the right things. Made me feel special. Made me feel like I mattered." She paused, her fingers tightening in her lap. "One night, he asked me to help him with something. A quick errand," he said. "I didn't ask questions. I just went with him because I trusted him." Her voice wavered slightly. "Turns out, he was robbing a convenience store. And I was the lookout." Matthias turned to look at her, his expression grave but not judgmental. "I didn't know," Benita continued. "I swear, I didn't know what he was doing until it was over. But it didn't matter. The police showed up. We both got arrested. I was 17, a minor. So I got probation. Community service. Marcus went to jail." She exhaled slowly. "My mom was devastated. My little brother and sister were scared. I felt like I'd ruined everything." Benita's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "After that, I promised myself I'd never be stupid again. I'd never trust the wrong person. I'd work hard, keep my head down, and take care of my family. That's it. No risks. No hoping for more than I deserved." She looked at Matthias then, her eyes fierce and vulnerable at the same time. "So when you talk about being terrified, I understand. Because I'm terrified too. I'm terrified that if I let myself care about you, you'll leave. Or worse, you'll stay, and I'll mess it up somehow. Because that's what I do. I make bad choices. I trust the wrong people." "You didn't make a bad choice with him," Matthias said firmly. "You were 17. You were manipulated." "Maybe," Benita said, "but it still happened. And I still carry it." Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You carry it with dignity." Benita blinked, surprised. You could have let it break you, Matthias continued. You could have given up, become bitter, blamed the world. But you didn't. You got up. You took care of your family. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. And you do it without asking for credit or sympathy. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on hers. That's not weakness, Benita. That's strength. Her eyes filled with tears now. She looked down, trying to compose herself. I don't feel strong, she whispered. You are, Matthias said. And you're not a bad choice. You're the best thing that's happened to me in 8 years. Benita looked up at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then why does it feel like you're still leaving? She asked, her voice breaking. Matthias's face crumpled slightly. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and took her hand. Her skin was warm. Her fingers trembled slightly in his. Because I don't know how to stay, he said, his voice raw. I don't know what that looks like. I live 6 hours away. You have a life here. A family that needs you. I can't ask you to give that up. And I can't pretend I have something to offer you when I'm just a 60-year-old man with more past than future. Benita squeezed his hand. You're not just that, she said firmly. You're the first person in years who saw me. Really saw me. Not what I could do for them. Not what I owed them. Just me. Matthias's eyes glistened. And maybe we don't have all the answers, Benita continued, her voice steadying. Maybe this doesn't make sense on paper. Maybe people will judge us. But I don't care. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like someone actually cares whether I'm okay. And I'm not ready to let that go just because it's complicated. Matthias stared at her, his throat tight. What are you saying? He asked quietly. I'm saying don't leave, Benita whispered. Not like this. Not without trying. Matthias sat there, holding her hand, the ocean moving steadily in front of them. And for the first time in 8 years, he let himself hope. I'm scared, he admitted. Me too, Benita said. I don't know if I can do this right. Neither do I. Matthias looked at her, this brave, beautiful, impossibly strong young woman, and he made a decision. Okay, he said softly. Benita's eyes widened. Okay. Okay, Matthias repeated. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how we make this work. But I'll try. If you will. Benita's face broke into a trembling smile. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't sad. Yes, she whispered. Yes. And there, on that weathered bench by the ocean, with the morning light spilling over them like a benediction, Matthias Crane let himself feel something he thought he'd lost forever. Not just hope, but the possibility of love. They didn't move for a while. They just sat there, hands intertwined, the weight of what they'd both confessed settling around them like morning fog, heavy, but not suffocating. Real. Benita wiped her cheeks with her free hand, laughing softly at herself. I can't believe I'm crying at work. Matthias smiled, a real smile, soft and unguarded. I won't tell anyone. She laughed again, and the sound of it did something to him. Made his chest feel lighter. Made the years feel less heavy. I need to get back, Benita said reluctantly, glancing toward the inn. Doris will wonder where I went. I know. But neither of them let go. Finally, Benita stood, still holding his hand, pulling him gently to his feet. They walked back toward the inn slowly, their fingers still laced together. It felt natural, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. At the door, Benita stopped and turned to face him. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Matthias looked at her, really looked at her, and for once, he didn't have a plan. No strategy. No clear path forward. Just a feeling. I don't check out, he said. Not yet. Benita's eyes widened. You're staying. For a few more days. If that's okay. Okay. Benita breathed out a laugh, her eyes bright. Yes. Yes, it's more than okay. Matthias reached up slowly, carefully, and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His hand lingered near her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin so gently it felt like a question. Benita leaned into his touch, just slightly. I need to do this right, Matthias said softly. I need to figure out how to make this work. I need to call my daughter. I need to think about logistics. I need. Matthias, Benita interrupted gently. He stopped. You don't have to have it all figured out today, she said. We'll figure it out together. He exhaled, something in his shoulders releasing. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. Together, Benita confirmed. And then, before either of them could overthink it, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. It was quick, innocent, but it left a warmth that spread through Matthias like sunlight breaking through clouds. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed, her smile shy. I'll see you later, she asked. You will, Matthias promised. She squeezed his hand once more, then let go and slipped back inside. Matthias stood there for a moment, his hand still tingling where hers had been. And for the first time in 8 years, he felt alive. That afternoon, Matthias sat in his room with his phone in his hand. He'd been staring at his daughter's contact for 20 minutes. Finally, he pressed call. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Dad. Emma's voice was surprised but warm. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Matthias said. I wanted to talk to you about something. Okay. Emma said slowly. What's going on? Matthias stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. I met someone. There was a pause. You met someone? Emma repeated, her tone careful. Yes. Like, met someone? Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, that's great, Emma said, and she sounded genuine. I mean, it's been 8 years. I've been hoping you'd wait. Where are you? Are you still at that inn? I am. So you met her there? She works here. Oh. Emma's tone shifted slightly. Not disapproving, exactly. Just cautious. What's her name? Benita. Benita Brown. And she's, what, a manager? Owner. Matthias hesitated. She works the front desk. And housekeeping. Silence. Dad, Emma said carefully. How old is she? Matthias closed his eyes. 24. The silence that followed was louder than words. Dad. I know, Matthias said quickly. I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking. But Emma, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Emma asked, and her voice was gentle, not accusatory. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you met a woman young enough to be your daughter who works at a hotel, and... She's not using me, Matthias said firmly. If that's what you're worried about. I'm not saying that, Emma said. I'm just... Dad, I want you to be happy. I really do. But it's complicated. I know it's complicated. Does she know you're 60? She knows. And does she understand what that means? What you've been through? What kind of life you've lived? She understands more than you think, Matthias said quietly. Emma sighed. Dad, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I just don't want you to get hurt. Or worse, I don't want you to hurt her. Matthias felt something tighten in his chest. Neither do I. Then maybe you need to think about whether this is really fair to her, Emma said softly. She's 24. She has her whole life ahead of her. And you deserve happiness too, Dad. But maybe not at the expense of hers. Matthias didn't respond. Because part of him, the part that had been a father for 32 years, knew Emma had a point. Just be careful, okay? Emma said. For both your sakes. I will, Matthias promised. After he hung up, he sat on the edge of the bed, Emma's words echoing in his head. Maybe not at the expense of hers. Was he being selfish? Was he taking something from Benita that she'd regret giving? He didn't know. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away now. Not after what they'd shared. Not after she'd asked him to stay. He'd just have to prove, to Emma, to himself, to the world, that this was real. That evening, Benita finished her shift and found Matthias waiting in the lobby. Hi, she said, surprised but pleased. Hi. He stood, his hands in his pockets. I was wondering, would you like to take a walk? With me. Benita glanced at the clock. It was almost 7. She should go home. She should get rest. But she didn't want to. "I'd love that," she said. They walked along the beach as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The sand was cool beneath their feet. The waves rolled in gently, rhythmic and soothing. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't need to. Finally, Matthias broke the silence. "I called my daughter today," he said. Benita looked at him. "How did that go?" "She's worried," Matthias admitted. "About us. About the age difference. About whether I'm thinking clearly." "Are you?" Benita asked softly. Matthias stopped walking and turned to face her. The wind tugged at his hair, and the fading light made his eyes look almost silver. "I don't know if this is the smart thing," he said honestly. "I don't know if we can make this work. I don't know what people will say or how hard it'll be." He reached for her hand. "But I know that when I'm with you, I feel like myself again. Not the soldier. Not the widower. Just me. And I haven't felt that in a very long time." Benita's eyes glistened. "I feel that too," she whispered. Matthias stepped closer, his other hand coming up to cradle her face gently. "I'm going to mess this up sometimes," he said quietly. "I'm going to overthink. I'm going to worry. I'm going to be afraid." "Me too," Benita said. "But I want to try," Matthias said. "With you. If you'll have me." Benita smiled through her tears. "I already said yes, remember?" Matthias smiled too, a soft, vulnerable smile that made him look younger somehow. And then, slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, tender, not rushed or hungry, but full of something deeper. Promise. When they pulled apart, Benita rested her forehead against his chest, and Matthias wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. The ocean moved behind them. The sky deepened into twilight. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't alone. 3 months later, the Saltwind Inn looked different in January. The holidays had passed, leaving the town quieter than ever. The sky was gray most days, the air sharp with winter cold. But inside room 12, there was warmth. Matthias had extended his stay twice. Then a third time. Mrs. Calloway, the inn's owner, had raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She'd seen the way he looked at Benita. The way Benita's whole face lit up when he walked into a room. Some things didn't need explaining. Benita sat cross-legged on the bed, her laptop open in front of her, filling out an application. Matthias sat beside her, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing the form over her shoulder. "Community college," he read aloud. "Business administration." "It's just part-time," Benita said quickly. "I can still work. I'll take night classes and—" "Benita." Matthias placed his hand gently over hers. "You don't have to justify it." She looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I want you to do this," he said firmly. "You're brilliant. You deserve this chance." "It's expensive," she said quietly. "We'll figure it out." "Matthias." "We'll figure it out," he repeated, his voice soft but resolute. "Together. Remember." Benita's throat tightened. She nodded. He kissed the top of her head and went back to reading. That evening, they walked to their bench. It had become their place. The spot where everything had changed. The ocean was rough tonight, the waves crashing with a violence that somehow felt cleansing. The wind was cold, but Matthias had draped his jacket over Benita's shoulders, and she pulled it tight around herself, breathing in the scent of him, coffee and cedar and something distinctly warm. "I talked to my mom today," Benita said. "Yeah." Matthias looked at her. "How is she?" "Good. Better, actually. Malik got a part-time job at the grocery store. Ayana made honor roll." Benita smiled. "Mom asked about you." Matthias raised an eyebrow. "What did she say?" Benita hesitated, then laughed softly. She said, "Is he good to you?" And when I said yes, she said, "Then I don't care how old he is. Just make sure he knows you're not to be taken for granted." Matthias smiled. "I like your mother." "She'd like you too," Benita said. Then, quieter, "I want you to meet her. When you're ready." Matthias turned to face her fully, his expression serious but tender. "I'm ready," he said. "Whenever you are." Benita's eyes softened. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They sat like that for a long time, watching the ocean rage and settle. "Do you ever regret it?" Benita asked quietly. "Regret what?" "Staying. Choosing this. Choosing me." Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Every morning, I wake up and I'm surprised. Not that you're here, but that I get to be. That I get another day with you. And I think, how did I get this lucky?" Benita's eyes filled with tears. "I don't regret it," Matthias said firmly. "Not for a second. Do you?" "No," Benita whispered. "Never." He kissed her temple, and she closed her eyes, letting herself feel it, the safety, the warmth, the impossible, beautiful reality of being loved. Later that night, back in the room, Benita fell asleep with her head on Matthias's chest, her breathing slow and even. Matthias lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his hand resting gently on her back. He thought about Caroline, about the guilt he'd carried for so long, about the fear that loving someone new meant betraying her memory. But tonight, for the first time, he felt something different. Peace. Not because he'd forgotten Caroline. He never would. But because he finally understood that loving again didn't erase what came before. It didn't diminish it. It honored it. Caroline had loved him, even when he'd been absent. Even when he'd failed her. She'd forgiven him. She'd wanted him to be happy. And maybe, just maybe, this was what that looked like. Not perfection. Not a life without scars. But a second chance. A choice to stay open. A willingness to try again. Matthias looked down at Benita, her face peaceful in sleep, and he made a silent promise. He wouldn't fail her the way he'd failed Caroline. He would show up. He would be present. He would love her the way she deserved. Every single day. 6 months later, Benita graduated from her first semester with a 3.8 GPA. Matthias was in the front row when she received her certificate at the small community college ceremony, clapping louder than anyone else. Afterward, they went to dinner at a little seafood place by the water. Nothing fancy. Just the two of them, sharing a meal, talking about her classes, about his plans to volunteer at the VA hospital, about the tiny apartment they were looking at together, halfway between the inn and her family. At one point, Benita reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me," she said simply. "For staying." Matthias squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me." Some people believe love has an age, a right time, a proper season. But love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't check your resume or count your years. It simply arrives, quiet, unexpected, undeniable. Matthias Crane had spent 60 years learning how to survive. It took a 24-year-old woman with calloused hands and a tender heart to teach him how to live. And Benita Brown, who had spent her whole life believing she wasn't worthy of being chosen, learned that sometimes the greatest love comes not from someone perfect, but from someone willing to try. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the next year would bring, or the year after that. But they had something more important. They had each other. And they had decided, together, that love wasn't about time. It was about presence. About showing up. About choosing again and again to stay. Some loves don't arrive suddenly. They appear like morning light, unnoticed at first, but impossible to forget once felt. And once you've felt it, you carry it with you. Always.